Tunde, Tunde,
Sir.
okay, because somebody just sent a message to me, say, can the line be opened?
It is now, sir.
Okay.
It is now. We're live, sir. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the broadcast this evening and this morning, this afternoon, wherever you are joining from. Thank you for joining this broadcast of the Academy of International Affairs. Just before we go into the program itself for today, a few announcements to make. The first one is please, to make your contributions as the program goes on, please make sure that there isn't any other device that is broadcasting in the room that you're in. That will avoid any issues around feedback of sound. So before unmuting yourself, please make sure that there isn't any other device in the area that you're in. Also, we've noticed that quite a few people have joined without their names. It will be helpful if you can rename yourself. So if you want to make contributions, we can pick your name and we can call you rather than just seeing the names of mobile phones on there. Also, I want to apologize way ahead. If I do not call or pronounce your name properly when calling you up, please forgive me. I do not know all the names. And also, I do not know all the titles of people who have joined. In case I do not use the right title for you, I do apologize for that ahead of the broadcast. And just before we go and we start, I'm going to play a short video clip from the Academy. And once that completes, the next voice that you would hear with me will be that of the president of the Academy. Thank you all for joining us today. And without much ado, we'll play the clip and we'll go into the broadcast. Thank you. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator.
Good afternoon,
good
sir.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen who have joined us for this inaugural activity by the Academy of International Affairs, a platform that brought together those whom some may call the ancient of foreign policy in Nigeria. We are made up of retired professionals, former honorable ministers, and retired professors. And as you've seen from our mandate, we want Nigerians to be engaged in the debate and conversation on issues of global concern which affect the national interest. And that is why we have decided to put on this very first program. We're aware that there are other issues that are agitating the minds of, I was going to say Africans, but actually it's the world. And that's been the plethora of coups in Africa, not to talk about the ongoing war in Ukraine. But BRICS is our first concern. And so I welcome you to this conversation. We will have divergent views. As scholars, that's acceptable. In fact, if all the views are one straight down one road, then something is wrong. We welcome the divergence of views that we're going to get on this program, but we hope that at the end, we will be able to activate a consensus based on ideas that have been floated this afternoon. So once again, I say welcome to you. And I like to call on Ambassador Joe Keshi, one of our original fellows in this academy, to please start the conversation. Thank you.
Ambassador Keshi, can you please unmute yourself, sir?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Professor Akinyemi, and I join you in welcoming all participants to this event. I have asked the floor to make a preliminary comment in terms of drawing attention to issues that I thought are to an issue that I thought, or to a question that I thought is very pertinent. And that I also believe that if we can find an answer, we might actually begin to understand why we're not among the original members of BRICS. In 2010, the Nigerian economy was doing relatively very well, in the sense that not only has it been rebased, and we were regarded as the largest economy in the continent. But when the original founders of BRICS decided to invite an African country, they chose South Africa. That was the second largest economy. I thought the question should be, in order for us to have a very good conversation, I thought we should ask ourselves, why in 2010, as the largest economy in the continent, Russia, China, and India did not consider Nigeria as the country of choice to be invited to be a member of one of the first to be admitted after the original members of, have come together. If we can find an answer to that as we begin this conversation, I believe we might also be able to ask ourselves, is it because we are not so well regarded? Why would they choose South Africa over Nigeria, the largest economy in the continent, for example? Why would Russia, China, particularly China, that has a lot of investment in this country and is involved in almost all sectors of the Nigerian economy, why did they ignore us and choose somebody else. I just thought I'd make that preliminary comment so that in addressing this issue, we should also realize that South Africa was invited to become a member in 2010, and Nigeria was not invited, even though it was the largest economy. And the question remains for me, why? Thank you, Mr. President, and I hope we can address our minds to this and to other issues that will be raised during the course of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Keshi. Can I accuse you of jumping into the stream in the middle and say perhaps the question you should be asking or should be raising is, why were we not part of the original founders of BRICS? Why? As they were meeting on the sideline, as they were having the conversations on the sideline of the UN General Assembly, why was Nigeria not invited into that conversation? I mean, somebody sitting somewhere in a foreign office must have decided that, look, let's have this initiative. Let's have this initiative. And then they decided, let's call in Brazil, let's call in India to join us in the conversation. Why, at that point in time, was Nigeria not considered worthy of being invited? Secondly, have you considered the idea that the invitation to South Africa, irrespective of the economy, was what I will call the Mandelaization of that decision, that the world was still feeling guilty about apartheid, and that the evolution of Mandela, the icon, the man who was prepared to spend 30-something odd years in prison, the world still felt South Africa deserved a reward for that, and that might have been what was at the back of their minds. I yield the floor to whoever wants to take off from there.
Thank you, sir. So if anyone wants to make a comment, please raise your hands. As soon as we see your hands raised, I will, you can unmute yourself. We've enabled that now. If you want to make a comment, please unmute yourself, raise your hand. I can see Dr. Husseini there. Dr. Husseini, can you please unmute yourself and make your comment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And I thank everybody for participating in this program. But I'm, with due respect, I tend to disagree with Professor Bolaji Akinyemi, an experience of himself an intellectual to the core. He knows more than the reason why Nigeria was not invited. Over the years, I believe we've lost the foreign policy aspect of it. I don't believe it is necessarily Mandelaization that South Africa got involved. I believe our foreign policy is just not existent after Professor Akinyemi himself just left. Ever since, we didn't have any footing again. We didn't have any bearing again. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. I can see Bernard Irusoto. Do you want to go ahead and make your comment? Can you go ahead, please, Bernard? All right, let me go to Israel Igwe. Your hand is raised as well. Can you make your comment, please?
So if you can hear me, am I on?
Yes, you are. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so for me, I want to agree with the last speaker because Nigeria had not rebased its economy for over 20 years before or more than 15 years, before the 2010 rebasing. And South Africa has been doing that. So the world will look at certain parameters in a country, the direction the country is going. I do not think that the rebasing Nigeria did and became the largest economy in Africa, many people around the world believed it. So they needed time to be sure that our rebasing was based on accurate data before they can begin to relate with us on that basis. Two, like the last speaker said, Nigeria is not engaging the world properly on foreign policy. Most times we go to international fora, we go there to shop. We don't do the right things that others are doing. And the third thing I want to say is that when Jim O'Neill brought up the idea of BRIC, it was analytical grouping. It was not for any kind of organization. So it is transmuted to an organization. Nigeria was not active in the foreign scene to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I can also see another hand, Professor Fawole. Can you please unmute yourself? Professor W.A. Fawole, please go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I think I want to agree with Professor Akinyemi's take on it, but at the same time, I want to raise this as a question, or a comment and a question at the same time. Apart from rebasing the economy and the Mandelaization that Professor Akinyemi talked about, couldn't this also be due to the fact that from 2007, during the era of President Musa Yar'Adua, the Nigerian leadership was largely absent on the international scene. The president was hobbled by ill health. He was unable to attend many international conferences or to show up in, even sometimes at the United Nations and things like that. So I would also think that Nigeria's poor visibility on the international scene during that era, when the president was struck down by the illness that prevented him from showing up in different places, might have affected Nigeria not being considered as important enough to have been invited. That's just my take. It's a question I think others can also react to it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for that. I can see Chuka. Can you please unmute yourself? Chuka Anatogo.
Yes. Good afternoon, moderator, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Go ahead, sir. We can hear you.
Okay. I think that one of the reasons perhaps we were not invited to the forum is that if you look at BRICS, the way I understand it is a bit of an economic political forum. And when you look at the trajectory of Nigeria's economic direction, I don't think it's as robust as what you will find comparing it to South Africa. And then in that regard, or on the other hand, I agree with the last speaker on what he said, talking about Nigeria's absence at the international forum. Yes, that's my comment.
All right, thank you. I can see that Bernard Irusota, you've got your hand raised again. Do you want to make your comment, please? All right, no, still having issues. All right, I can see Sheyi Onofowokon. Sheyi Onofowokon. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you very much, Prof. Your Excellencies. I want to follow up on two issues raised earlier and then add a third one to it. The first one is that probably at that time, our foreign policy was very weak. We were not very coordinated, and the world could see through us, so we were ignored. Secondly, I want to share Professor Akinyemi's idea of Mandelization. The rave of Mandela at that time and sentiments will have made South Africa to be invited. Lastly, I want to suggest reading through the list of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa had elements of nuclear power. Brazil had industrial nuclear, China was fully nuclear, India same, South Africa was industrially nuclear, Russia was fully nuclear. I think these people must have gotten together, see themselves as operating in the same ambience, and then decide to go ahead and form this group. Thank you very much, sir.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Professor Akinyemi, do you want to respond to some of the comments that have been shared before I take more comments, sir?
No. It's the way we're going, actually addressing that issue raised by Ambassador Keshi, and my initial reaction to that. I suspect that others still want to go on along that line, and I will still yield to them.
All right, sir. I have a quick question to put forward, or view to put forward. A lot of the comments so far have been around why Nigeria hasn't been invited and wasn't invited as the next cohort. But I also think maybe we need to look at the structure of BRICS itself, that model that we have there. Why would that work for Africa? Why is that something that will benefit Africa as a whole, or Nigeria more specifically? Are there other groupings that we could have? And I think maybe that is something that we should throw in there too.
Mr. Moderator, I think that will be, let us finish with why we were not invited. Then that will be the second level of our discussion. Even as structured now, will it be in our national interest or in African national interest? I think that will be the second level of the debate. I would like us to finish with why we were not invited initially.
All right, so I can see Ambassador God knows Igali. You have your hands raised. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency and Mr. Moderator, colleagues. I would like to agree with what has been said, but also bring out an aspect that may appear a bit sublime, but is quite important. The fact that there appears to be some form of deliberate bias against Nigeria in several global circles. There's a feeling that Nigeria is too strong. There's also a perception that Nigeria is a potential power, as we claim to be the giant of Africa. And that creates some form of biases in some circles. And let's not forget, also, we may take it as trivial, but the fact that between Nigeria and South Africa, Nigeria
I think we lost Ambassador Igali there. While Ambassador, we can hear you, sir. All right. While we wait for him to rejoin, we have Omotola Ilesami. Omotola
I don't
Ilesami.
want us to forget at any time that this is a world where
Ambassador Egali.
Yes, sir.
We lost you for a few moments there. I don't know if you want to repeat what you were saying. Yes, we can now. We can now.
Well, what I said is that whether we take it or not, this is a world where a very strong black voice will, one way or the other, will not be preferred to a voice where there is some element of a white presence. Nigeria has always claimed, and rightly so, to be the voice of the black man. And between Nigeria and South Africa, in a group that is largely where the black presence is in the minority, there may be a preference for a country that has a more rainbow coalition presence. I think that is an element. This idea of the phobia against Nigeria and the fact that we are a really black country. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Omotola Ilesami, do you want to unmute yourself, please? Omotola Ilesami.
It's hard, man.
Can you unmute yourself, please? All right, let me move on. I can see many hands here. Dr. Farouk Boge, do you want to unmute yourself? Dr. Farouk Boge.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Your Excellency, Prof. Thank you, sir. I just want to add my voice to the last speaker regarding the contest between Nigeria and South Africa. And if you look at the nomenclature of the BRICS, see that the name of South Africa is in that. And extending it from that perspective of the contest between Nigeria and South Africa, see that Nigeria, if Nigeria joins today, it shows that Nigeria will not be part of that nomenclature. We have the BRICS: Brazil, India, Russia, China, and South Africa. So if Nigeria joins today, where does it belong in terms of nomenclature and in terms of the pre-existing contest between Nigeria and South Africa as regard who leads South Africa as a continent? So that's all that I was also looking at that as maybe one of the factor, one of the ego that Nigeria is taking as not joining part of the BRICS. Thank you very much.
All right, let me go back to Bernard Irusota. I'll try again for you. Can you unmute yourself now, please? Bernard Irusota, do you want to unmute yourself? All right, any more views on that? I don't see any more hands raised at the moment.
Okay, maybe I could come in, Mr. Moderator.
Okay, sir.
I mean, the last issue that was raised, even at the time
Can
when...
you hear me, sir? Bernard Rusota.
Yes, we can now. We can now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I wasn't exactly able to log on the dot, so I regret that what I have to say now is without the benefit of whatever introductory remarks my teacher, Professor Akiyemi, may have made at the beginning of his presentation. But however, I do distinctly recall that when he was foreign minister several years ago, he was very much an advocate of the concept of another layer of, shall we say, middle level players on the world scene. And it would appear that present events are indicating a need to kind of revive the concept. I will assume from his recent statements on some major TV media, like channels like Arise, that he's still very much interested in the revisiting of that concept. Now, pertaining to our, shall we say, somewhat complicated relations with South Africa, I would say that it does look as if our efforts during the liberation struggle, the tremendous sacrifices we made, both mostly in material terms. I do not know if mercenaries from Nigeria actually participated in any war, but I do know that when we were in school, we all made donations to all kinds of funds to assist the struggle of the South African people. I'm not at all surprised that our relationship would somewhat seem to be reversing itself after the men of. Can you still hear me, sir?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Seems to be reversing itself into one of love-hate. And I suspect, I have no empirical basis yet for my suspicion, but I do suspect that this is not entirely South Africa's doing. The imperialist powers, the neo-colonialist powers, there's no need for me to name them, would naturally feel that their interests are in danger in an Africa in which two major powers, at least as at now, in, if you like, sub-Saharan Africa, will perhaps find a common cause in evicting them and their interests from this continent. And therefore, it will be completely strategically imperative for them to work, however subtly, in the background without disclosing their hidden intentions to keep the two countries disunited. Nigeria remains the biggest Black African country in the world. South Africa, for now, seems to have more technological know-how than Nigeria. Can you imagine if the two powers were working together and decided, all Francophone countries, the infamous agreements that were reached with them at independence stand dissolved or repudiated? Can you imagine what that would do? It would have made all these coups in our Francophone neighborhood completely unnecessary. And that is not all. The failed effort to inaugurate I believe it was called an ECU currency, which France very cleverly hijacked at the last minute and aborted, would never have failed. By now, Africa, West Africa, at least the West African part of it, would at least have achieved a situation of a common currency. These are my own preliminary thoughts on what you may have said previously. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Akinyemi, before you comment, I can see a few more hands raised. Do you want me to take those first before coming to? Okay, sir. So Air Commodore Onitiju, can you please unmute yourself, sir?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Moderator, Your Excellency, the President of the Academy. Thank you for providing this platform. In my view, I want to believe that the absence of focus was likely responsible for our being excluded. And by that, I mean leadership. The intellectual content of our foreign policy objectives took flight when His Excellency Professor Bolaji Akin left that scene. And unfortunately, the political leadership that we had as at the time of the formation of BRICS, like somebody rightly said, yes, maybe the president might have had health challenges, but then the leadership is not only the president. And so South Africa was regarded, apart from probably the more Mandelization that His Excellency mentioned, South Africa was seen as a better and more serious partner. In spite of our past relationship with them during the colonial days, the apartheid days, I meant to say, we go into things without focus or objectives. And the international community has seen us in that light. South Africa has emerged to be our rival. We were talking about the seat on the Security Council, but are we really focused? We got distracted because leadership does not really know what it wants on the international scene. Yes, Africa centerpiece of our foreign policy, but then you still do a lot of modification. I remember a colloquium held in 1985, which purported to look at and revise the centerpiece policy. Because the people for whom you care, if they do not care for you, you have to care about yourself. You have to go for what you think they can eventually benefit from. So to me, most of the time, foreign policy is dictated often by your domestic policies. And if you don't get it right at home, where intellectuals are excluded from debates, and people who do not have the requisite leadership quality and focus at the helm of affairs, God help such nation. We are still in dire straits, but we have to refound ourselves. Foreign policy approach and objective has to be refounded, has to be reviewed, and it is through engagement such as this that we can get back our pride of place. I want to stop there. I yield the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I can see a few more hands, and I just want to encourage, again, based on some comments I can see in the chat, if we can make our comments quite brief and succinct so I can get to a lot of the people who have their hands raised. Barrister Mrs. Ioda, once again, apologies if I get the pronunciation of your names wrong. Barrister Mrs. Ioda, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be on this forum. And thank you, Prof, with all that you are doing. I would also like to make a few comments, especially as a master's holder in international affairs and diplomacy, and also a PhD student of law. I think that part of being exempted comes from our conceptual understanding, especially in the new development of foreign policy. When you talk about it on the religious diplomacy, Nigeria primarily sees itself more of an Islamic angle than of a secular. And you could see that it pushes the agenda of belonging to some of the developmental countries or economic forums that host the same belief. And you will agree with me that we are part of the OIC, and Nigeria is currently the only non-Muslim country, so to say, that is a member of the D8, in which it is called a developing country. So putting it on the same platform, we take it from the perception that our leaders, like my immediate commentator here has said, we're not looking at the international agenda, but looking more on the religious, it will deviate their focus on it, and they don't want to identify with that. So I would like to say that it is about time that Nigeria will define herself more of a secular state and also drive those things that will put us on the international scene, and we define ourselves in those terms. Because when you talk about in terms of development, and even though technologically South Africa is more developed, but when you talk about sources of power and then economic wealth, we are more well endowed. And with the right leadership, and at some other time, our economy was growing, even one of the fastest in Africa. We have a place and a position, and we're even called to be the giant of Africa. So that is just what I want to say, that we need to redefine ourselves, and we need to give ourselves an international outlook more than a religious outlook. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that. I can see Omotola Ilesami, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to make your comment? Hopefully you can unmute yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I've been struggling to unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, Prof, Your Excellencies. My own intervention has to be from the angle that, like Professor Pauli has said earlier, that Nigeria's poor visibility and lack of assertiveness on the global scene at that time could have been one of the issues that contributed to her not being invited. Because I read somewhere that at the time of BRIC, when it was just Brazil, Russia, India, and then China, there was a need to shop for an African country to be a part of it. And then South Africa lobbied actively to be a part of it. And so it could have been South Africa's effort lobbying that got South Africa as part of BRICS. You know, for me, that I read it somewhere, and I think that could be one of the reasons why, because Nigeria was practically absent, low visibility for Nigeria at that time. And so South Africa was able to take that opportunity and lobbied actively to be part of BRICS, and got to be part of BRICS. So for me, that's my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can see Professor Bola Akinteriwa. Can you please unmute yourself, sir? Professor Bola Akinteriwa. Okay, I think we lost him there. That was the last hand raised, sir. Professor Akinyemi, would you want to comment? Oh, hold on, sir. I can see Jayola Joseph. Can you unmute yourself, please? Jayola Joseph.
Thank you very much.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Okay, I think we lost.
I want to thank our professor, His Excellency Professor. Are you hearing me? Yeah,
we
for
can,
bringing us
go ahead,
together. Why Nigeria, first and foremost, was there any advertisement in 2009, not even on the 16th of June 2009 in Russia, advertisement asking for the country to come join them, because they were only Brazil, Russia, India, and where were we when they were formed? To the extent that South Africa was faster than us, or started being invited, to the extent that China, I understood, South Africa to be admitted, and the other members agreed to allow. These three at that time, before South Africa came, were regarded
Right. I think we are losing you, sir. Kayode Komolafe, do you want to unmute yourself and speak? Kayode Komolafe.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Do you have me now?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, I was saying that there was no advertisement for Nigeria that Nigeria would have taken advantage of to come in. But maybe South Africa was very aggressive in their foreign policy at that time, that when a BRIC was formed in 2009, they started also applying to the extent that China was the one that sponsored them. They started in August, and by December 2010, South Africa was admitted. So I don't think there is anybody's fault from outside. It is an endogenous fault. Like some people have already said, that maybe we were in a limbo in our foreign policy at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Can I go back to Kayode Komolafe, and then I'll come back to Professor Akintenriwa, just following the order. Kayode Komolafe, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Yeah, if Professor Akinyemi will permit, I like to expand his question, as which was the intro, for this segment of the discussion. And that is that if 14 years ago we were not invited, which is the question, and why? Can we also ask if why again a few days ago there was a meeting of BRICS in South Africa, and 2 other African countries, were invited, namely Egypt and Ethiopia, and Nigeria is not part of it. So we may also ask the question. And my attempt to answer it, just to bring up some ideas for us to reflect on that. When Jim Modi, wrote his paper more than 20 years ago, his consideration was economic. He was looking at the economic potentials of those 5 countries that he considered them. But if we are not invited, then I mean it's based on perception. Well, it's correct to say that there is little we can do about how others perceive us, but there is much we can do, on how we present ourselves, regardless of the perception of others. And that is that between 2001 and now, not the last week, what has been the attitude of Nigeria to BRICS? That is all the administrations that we have had then. The Nigerian elite, including the foreign policy establishment that we have we behaved in a way that shows that we feel that BRICS, actually matters? Whereas the purpose, what brings these countries together is economic. But the way we perceive it in Nigeria, we read economic, we read political more, whereas the primary concentration is economic. But in Nigeria, our attitude to it is political. And that is that, how can we belong to a bloc where you have Russia and China? Well, how would the West, see it? Even if we're having any economic benefits, is it the kind of thing that IMF and World Bank will approve of? This kind of neo-colonial mentality and the hegemony of imperialist thinking, whatever that we do, for me is an undercurrent, to all of this. For instance, I'm not surprised that China, in particular, would have considered, maybe suggesting Nigeria or whatever, that even though we are not in BRICS, for more than 3 years now, there has been an arrangement of a currency swap between China and Nigeria. It's been mentioned in the course of this discussion that it's surprising that given the huge economic intercourse between Nigeria and China, that Nigeria is not considered primarily on the in the consideration of China. But the thing is that whereas China has been enthusiastic about implementing the currency swap, but because given the kind of economic thoughts that prevail in Nigeria that are dominating, from the Nigerian part, we have been lukewarm about it. In fact, the whole idea is on the table, but it's more or less there. So what I'm trying to say therefore is that in answering this question, we should also consider the fact that does Nigeria even feel that BRIC matters, you know, before we talk of whether others invite us or not, you know. So if we cannot do anything about the perception of others, we should be able to do something about how we present ourselves. Thank you for the opportunity, sir.
Thank you. Professor Bola Akinteriwa.
Thank you, sir. 3 quick issues: Mandelization, economy, and diplomacy of invitation in international relations. As regards Mandelization, there's no way Professor Akinyemi wouldn't have been more correct. He couldn't have been more correct by raising the issue of Mandelization. South Africa had no image before 1994. It was when Nelson Mandela came in that a new personality was now being built around South Africa until 2009, even though Nelson Mandela had left. The truth, the hard facts on ground was that it was on the basis of the personality of Nelson Mandela, because many people expected that with the election of Nelson Mandela, he will reciprocate, he will mistreat, he will want to revenge. But he didn't do that. As a result of that, the international community decided to work more closely. And that was how, from the time of Nelson Mandela's foundation for a new South Africa. So if Professor Akinyemi is talking about Mandelization as a factor in this particular case, there's no way he would have been wrong. The second point is economy. Ambassador Joe Keshi now wanted to know why, for instance, in spite of Nigeria being acknowledged as the biggest economy, he was quite right. And there's no way he wouldn't have been more correct. Because until the Minister of Finance, don't forget that it was Okonjo-Iweala who said that, look, people looked at South Africa as having the biggest economy. That Nigeria was only not reckoning with different things, informal trade, different activities ignored in the computation for GDP. It was as from that time now that at the level of Africa and internationally, people now begin to see Nigeria as the biggest economy. So by that particular time, it is true that BRICS started more concretely as from 2009, but they have been having meetings on the margins of the UN 5, 6, 7 years before then. They have been consulting, but Nigeria was not known to be the biggest economy by that time. That might be a reason for not reckoning with Nigeria to be invited for. Now, thirdly, in terms of diplomacy of invitation, it is just like when we are talking about official visits, unofficial visits, officious visits. There is a diplomacy guiding all this. When we are inviting, it may be at the instance of the ambassador of Nigeria, for instance. If we want Nigeria to be invited, Nigeria can make a request. But if it is in the interest of the country to be visited too, the country will link up with Nigeria's ambassador and propose that, look, we will be glad to have your president visit us. It is both ways. So if Ambassador Lewu and many others are talking about the inefficient approach to our diplomacy, they too are very correct. What did we do? Did we make any efforts to seek possible admission of Nigeria into the place? No, I wouldn't think that it is South Africa that is that should be held responsible. No, our foreign policy has been faulty different ways. In the past, in fact, foreign policy under Muhammadu Buhari, what was our focus? We didn't have any focus. We were only reacting. We don't have any programmatic foreign policy. So I think that when we are talking about likely reasons for non-invitation of Nigeria there, please, I think that, in fact, since Professor Akinyemi left and many others, what really are the theoretical underpinnings? Do we normally show keen interest? What does foreign policy mean to all the governments there? This is my own humble submission for now. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Moderator.
Yes, sir.
Maybe I could just round up on this so we can move on to the issue you raised as regards the way forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, this is going to be the mystery in our foreign policy, because those who were within this system that I will expect to give us answers to the issues raised have either been dodging the question. Maybe there is a reason why they can't tell us. I won't mention names of those within the system at that time, because there were people within the system who should be able to tell us, did they hear a whisper that some organization was about to be formed? Did they then send back dispatches to headquarters? What reaction did they get? Somebody has said they met in Russia. Why were we not? Why didn't we attend that? And my friend Bola Akintanewa has just again raised that same issue. What were we thinking about? That is a mystery. What were we thinking about when they were forming this? No answer has been presented. There are certain issues we can discount. It is true that at the time when they were about to give birth to this organization, President Yar'Adua was very ill. But then don't forget that this was just after the activism of President Obasanjo. And yet this was at Obasanjo's time, coincided with the time when I'm sure, waves were already coming out of somebody's brain, whether in China or wherever, about BRICS. So while it is true that President Yar'Adua was ill, that will have to just be one factor that we will have to take into consideration. The lobbying by South Africa and the hostility towards us by South Africa, believe me, is so thick that if you apply a sharpened sword to it, you still will not be able to cut through. Let me give just one example. During my NADECO days in London, the Commonwealth Secretariat had put together a conference or a weekend retreat on the Nigerian Civil War. And they had brought people from the High Commission and those of us who were in NADECO, and for some reason, some South African scholars. And I lost my cool. I lost my cool when the South Africans there said, oh, look, we are ready to teach you Nigerians how to run a federal state because we are practicing. This is, I'm talking about 1997 or so, because we in South Africa, we are practicing federalism. We are an authority on federalism, and we will be able to make, authorities available to you. I lost my cool. I said, excuse me. You, South Africans, teach us. I said, look, forget the fact that people from the High Commission and I are on different sides at this time, but not on this issue. We've been practicing federalism before you could even spell F in South Africa. So don't you dare. I mean, when they saw really the strength with which I spoke, the people from the Congress Secretariat had to say, well, look, we will just leave that issue. So the people said that South Africans, before they were even invited, might have been going on a campaign to make sure once it became evident they were going to invite an African to campaign for themselves and to demarket Nigeria. The demarketing of Nigeria started as soon as Mandela left prison. And the South Africans have seen Nigeria as a competitor for leadership, for influence, for who will be the interlocutor for Africa on the world scene. And I think Ambassador Igali is very right. If you go back to our history, how the British decided that they were going to hand over Nigeria to the least developed part of Nigeria is because they saw Nigeria with all its potentials and they wanted to have it under their control. They didn't want to have it under an Nkrumahist or a Nazarite type of leadership. So there was that convergence, I would say, of hostility between South Africa and the Western world. But then that, China, and this is the point raised by Ambassador Keshi, that China, with all its interests, I know those interests were not there in 2000, but I mean, the Chinese plan way ahead. They are far thinkers. They would have seen opportunities for them to come into Nigeria. That they also will not have will not have pitched their camp with us at the very beginning. Will have to be what Ambassador Igali made reference to when he was talking about the West. And again, let me give you an example. When I was at the Institute, we had this dialogue series with several countries. And so we went to China. And the Chinese, we were very well received, scholars from Nigeria and journalists from Nigeria. And we were discussing post-colonial Africa, post-colonial intervention of Africa into the world scene and so on and so forth. On the third day, the Chinese now came up with a draft MOU. And we looked at it and said, where did this come from? Oh, the Chinese said, no problem. Anytime an African delegation comes here, we prepare this and they sign. I said, oh, no, we don't do that. This MOU must contain our own ideas as well. it must reflect our agreement with you or disagreement with you. Do you know they couldn't understand that an African country will be standing up to China? And it was on the point when this conference, this dialogue was going to break up in disagreement that the Chinese leader then said, actually, our Nigerian friends are right. We cannot present them with a fait accompli. So we will tear this up and come up with a new one. But the Chinese were surprised. No other African delegation had come in and done this to them. And I think probably at that point, they also decided this African nation called Nigeria, we better be careful so we don't prop them up. So you can now see how the convergence between keep Nigeria in its place amongst every one of these countries. Russia, with whom Gawan had tilted because of the supply of weapons during the Civil War, was also still uncomfortable with us. So I think that basically there were several factors that operated against us being part of BRICS at its foundation. But don't forget that even as they were talking about BRICS, and my colleague who said, if Nigeria had been invited, how would the nomenclature have changed? In fact, somebody suggested it, that to just put the N before the C, so it becomes BRICS, without disrupting anything. But once BRICS had been formed, and it was evident that there were several countries that were unhappy at being excluded and yet had the potential. You know, the same school of thought in America that came up with BRICS now came up with MINTS. Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey, MINT, that this could be another organization that will now, of course, compete with BRICS and do the same thing that BRICS was trying to do, which is the deconstruction of the Bretton Woods post-World War II Western-dominated economic system. So why now, while we at this last exercise, is there anyone who wants to add to why our vice president had to say we didn't apply? We didn't apply, as if that is the answer to why we were not invited. And what then is the way forward? That's the way I will now put a table our next, the next movement on this. Why was it necessary for our vice president to say we did not apply? The fait accompli is we were not invited. What is the way forward?
Thank you, sir. I can see Ambassador Lewu, I think you have your hand raised first. If you want to unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Mr. Moderator. Why were we not invited? Because we did not apply, according to the Vice President. I wonder whether that was just a way to tell the Nigerians who were annoyed that were not invited to cool their temper. I think what really happened was that due to the interregnum since the departure of, or even during the period of President Buhari to the current President Tinubu, as I said earlier on, it appears the ministry and all those stakeholders we will always see in Nigeria in foreign policy or foreign affairs did not think that BRICS was good enough for Nigeria. Otherwise, since we are supposed to be invited and not to apply formally according to their rules of engagement, we should have started taking some formal or informal consultations with the countries that now form BRICS by letting them know our interest, if the country was interested, and that when the conference was going to be held in South Africa, we would have months ago started getting some sort of diplomatic moves, some shuttles, diplomatic shuttles to China, to Russia, to Brazil. Brazil is very friendly to Nigeria, and also to India, even if South Africa feels that we are their great rivals. We could have gone to them too. So that during that period of shuttle diplomacy, we would have been able to read the minds of the other members, whether when the meeting will be held in South Africa, Nigeria will be considered or not considered. Unfortunately, that type of shuttle diplomacy did not take place. And so I believe the BRICS members did not know whether we were actually interested or not interested. If you don't let them know your intention, how will they just say, come in? Supposing they said come in and we rejected, they will be embarrassed. So I believe that first thing first, we did not do our homework for those of us who would want us to belong to BRICS. Particularly the way in which subservience is being observed in our relationship with the G7, that is US, Europe, Western Europe. Should we always continue to tie ourselves to the apron of the Western world? What are we gaining by tying ourselves? There are financial institutions that are being backed by the US, that is the World Bank, the IMF. They give us so terrible conditionalities that sometimes we have no choice but to take. But if BRICS could act as an alternative or complementary to what we could get from the World Bank and IMF, it's an advantage for us to move in there so that the subservient relationship between the hegemon of US and Europe over us will be reduced, if not removed. I think our people require it. Now that we have a government in place, there needs to be a formal discussion, a formal seminar to see which way Nigeria wants to go. Another aspect of it is, okay, even if we join, what about our so-called non-alignment policy, which unfortunately has been moribund to a large extent? But we have never been deprived of relating with both the East and the West, because we've had a lot of relationship now with China, and also hopefully when the Ajaokuta steel mill is rejuvenated, I understand that the Russians are coming to do that again. We have never in the past been handicapped. But if we join BRICS, to what extent can we be sucked into the geopolitical problems of Russia or even China? If we have to, in BRICS, if they have to take collective action against those who are not members, to what extent can we be sucked into that type of collective responsibility?
Ambassador Lewis, we're starting to lose your connectivity,
For instance, when Russia invaded Ukraine, we voted against Russia.
Ambassador Lewu.
Let's move on.
Oh,
sorry.
Hello?
Yes, we're losing you, sir. Maybe I should move on and then come back to you. It's breaking. It's breaking, sir.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
We'll go back to him later.
I'll come back to you, sir. I'll come back to you, sir. I can see.
It's not my fault.
Understood, sir. There was a hand, Zainab Abba Haruna.
All right.
Can you please unmute yourself? Zainab Abba Haruna. Zainab Abba Haruna. Okay, no, let me move on. Dr. Dako Thomas.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm surprised that we are dwelling so much on Nigeria's participation or non-invitation or invitation to BRICS. In the first instance, I have not read official position if Nigeria itself had shown interest. It is only if he had shown interest and they snubbed that we can be talking of, you can be examining how our foreign policy has been in bad shape for some years now. And that's why we lost BRICS. And in any case, even if we applied, if we had shown interest and we even we were snubbed, I still don't see it as anything that is wrong or anything that is detrimental to the health of Nigeria, I mean to Nigeria's national interest. Because in the first instance, I have said it somewhere, I look at the objectives, the vision and the goal. I mean the vision and the mission and agenda of BRICS. And I feel that, well, it's not something that one should appreciate to the level that you start crying if you miss its membership. They are talking about cooperation, development, and influence in the world affairs. Yes, for cooperation, I do not see anything that is wrong in nations cooperating with one another. And I want to also emphasize the involvement of India. With India in that place, I don't see anything wrong in cooperation, because at least India is also was also part of G7, the last one that was held in Canada. And but to talk about influence, to enhance their influence in the world, in world affairs, shows to me that we are beginning to see another Cold War in a different dimension or in another shape. Because when you talk about enhancing your influence, each country, I don't think this has to be done at the multilateral level or collectively at an organizational level or a body level, because every nation aspires to enhance or to improve its influence in world affairs. So it shouldn't take BRICS, formation of BRICS, for any nation to, I mean, for nations to come together. It's obvious that this influence, enhancing the influence, is about US. Now, it is also clear from the agenda that they are trying to find an alternative to World Bank, which is the formation of new development bank, which they have formed, and also to curb US supremacy in world affairs. Like I said, I don't want Nigeria to be part of this kind of hostile formation or hostile collectivity. If we have to be clear about, if we have to have a focus on what we want for our nation and how to achieve our national interest, we must be able to have a kind of dispassionate or non-aligned position. We are not to be here or there. So I want to say that we, and the BRICS, yes, I know they have started since 2001 and they have made some progress from being 5 to maybe 9 now, since they have extended the invitation to about 4 or 5 nations. But I do not see them coming up with any structure like the EU. You know, if a body is serious like the EU, yes, one can say yes. I mean, this is a fundamental body. But when you don't have a structure for almost 22 years, you know, I've read their pamphlets, I've read everything. I've not seen where they have any, this idea. In 22 years, I know what EU had done, maybe since 1951. I know what EU had done till date, and that is why it is solid, you know, like that, and you cannot see. And then most of the nations that are also involved in these BRICS are nations that are witnessing one crisis or the other, either internally or externally. They are not nations that one can say can help you to guarantee political security, I mean, that can help you with your political security, because I can see that they also talk about political security, you know. So the position now is this: why should we be involved in an armed force or an organization with nebulous objective when we are not even clear? Why should we even be crying? I don't believe that we should be hyping this kind of these BRICS, you know. So with time, they will find their level, and let us leave it like that. I just that's my submission.
Thank you, sir. I can see quite a few hands are coming up. So what I will suggest is that if we can keep our submissions brief, I will try not to interrupt, but I might. So the next person I can see on the line, again, bear with me, I don't know who these names are, but the name Shegun is the next one that's showed up. Do you want to unmute yourself, please? Shegun. Shegun, can you unmute yourself? I have no last name on that one, please. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. I apologize. I joined late, and so I might have missed some of the contributions that have been made. My name is Shegun Apata. I think when I joined, I had some statement being made. So let me quickly make some clarifications so that we don't base some of our comment on some wrong absorptions. I had comments about the rivalry, the so-called rivalry between South Africa and Nigeria. I think that's a misplaced concept. There is none. What had happened is a complete mismanagement of South African-Nigerian affairs in the last 8 to 10 years. Prior, particularly from 1999 to 2008, roughly, when President Obasanjo on the one hand in Nigeria and Mandela Thabo Mbeki on the other side, after the Abacha debacle in New Zealand, Nigeria and South Africa formed what they call binational commission, headed at vice president level. I used to participate in those meetings, and during that period, there was unity of purpose in all global matters between Nigeria and South Africa on the one hand, and between Nigeria, South Africa, and Nigeria. In essence, the trio more or less spoke for the African continent, and they were well regarded. They were consulted on all global affairs. No decision affecting Africa could be taken or were taken at that time without the concord of these three countries. So I don't know whether Ambassador Shinkai is on the line. He will confirm exactly some of those, what I'm saying, and I don't want to belabor that. Post that, on our Nigerian side, we mismanage many of these things. And the Binational Commission gone moribund. So I think I should make that clarification. BRICS. I think you have to permit me because BRICS is a mismatch of objectives, mismatch of members, and Nigeria does not belong there. And Nigeria should, I saw a post by Ambassador Igali saying that we should not cry over. I don't see any reason why any Nigerian should even be bothered talking about BRICS. It's not where we belong. We are not invited. Yes, because let's first keep aside our national pride and deal seriously at the state of Nigeria of today. Nigeria economy is totally battered. We are spending, everybody in the globe knows we're spending about 97% of our revenue in servicing debt. What is the level of our foreign reserve? Is it 3.7 that we are saying is not? Oh, let's seriously. So the economy is not the population, the 200 million that will bestow respect and influence on Nigeria. No, it is the economy, the state of our economy that will bestow respect and influence on the country. And we should not walk away from that, that if Nigeria were a listed company today, it would be under receivership because technically it's bankrupt. We have to accept that. And who wants to invite a country that is facing this horrible, tragically horrible economic situation to be part of an organization? And added to that is Nigeria has been absent globally for almost a decade. We've been sleeping. And some of the players,
your microphone is unmuted. Ambassador Hart wants to speak.
I'm still on the line. Ambassador Hart, you're coming. And the issue is, people have been saying we're not just sleeping, we have been snoring as a country. And you want to be invited. Invited to what? So don't let's deceive us. And this so-called objective that BRICS will unwind the current global economic order is a deception. They're not going to be in a position to unwind anything. They're not going to create a new global economic order. It's an illusion. And we'll see what happens in the next decade. And besides, the objective of India is tremendously different from the objective of Russia, is different from the objective of China. They're strange bedfellows. So don't let's kid ourselves and be losing passion that Nigeria, even Nigeria were even invited, the answer should be no. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I can see Omo J.K. Kelvin. If you can please keep your submission short to 3 minutes so we can move on. Omo J.K. Kelvin.
Sorry, but just one last sentence I forgot to mention, and it's important. There's, please pardon me. There's respect is not bestowed; it is earned. Nigeria has to earn that respect. So, as we say in French, oubliez pas. We must not forget that respect is never respect and influence is not bestowed; it's earned. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Omo J.K. Kelvin. Please, if you can make it brief.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I think Nigeria joining the BRICS is just, I'm seeing it as something that Nigeria will just help the founder of those BRICS to achieve their necessary standards. There is no need of Nigeria joining it because they are even Nigerian objective, even if after declaring their own objective cannot be met, cannot be met. It's only to help those founders to achieve their own objective. I think what is best for Nigeria is to, accept and perfect this regional organization. For example, after just organize it and join hands with Nigeria, with other African countries to perfect it the way European Union did their own. I think from there, after perfecting it, then they can look international, because most of the international organizations that they are into right now, most of the objectives are not yet met. So I think, joining them now is not is unnecessary. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for that. I think that's the last hand that I have raised at the moment. So, Professor Akinyemi, bear with me 1 second, sir. I'm not sure I can hear you. One second, sir. Just bear with me. Professor Akinyemi, can you go ahead, sir? One second, sir. I think we lost your audio, sir. Bear with me, sir. 1 second. I think the tech team can help to look at that quite quickly. Bear with me. One second, sir. We will get that sorted in a minute. Please bear with me. All right, sir. I think you should be good now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. I was saying that I was glad at the last two contributions, because it shows we are not echoing each other and we're having a robust contribution. Anyone who says that there was a meeting of minds of South Africa and Nigeria during the period of Obasanjo will probably be mistaken the interest of the rider and the interest of the horse. I remember a particular episode where members of the National Assembly had criticized MTN of trying to bribe them by distributing sets to them before a decision was taken. And following the complaint, Obasanjo called Thabo Mbeki and said, "Mbeki, are you trying to bribe Nigerian legislators?" And Mbeki said, "Of course not." And Obasanjo said, "Well, there you are." I mean, what did he expect Mbeki to say? And was that the answer? And in any case, was that the position he showed? I mean, was that the way he should have handled the allegation about being bribed? It was obvious that MTN was doing what it should. That was corporate illegality or corporate, whatever language you want to use it. I think those of us who are on the outside and watching the interaction between South Africa and Nigeria realize that this issue of that Obasanjo never got over this issue of comradeship and the apartheid struggle that we were still having. I don't want to bring out, into the open the number of occasions when Obasanjo sacrificed the interest of Nigeria for his own personal interest, in South Africa. We can come up with a lot of instances where we feel that, some of our leaders during that time themselves, were the Mandelization that I referred to earlier was something that was affecting their own attitude towards South Africa. But whether Nigeria should be a member of BRICS or not, I could again come up with an example of my conversation with President Jonathan in 2013. We've been talking about several issues, and I raised this question of membership of BRICS, and his reaction, which I agreed with, by the way. I'm not saying this in criticism, was we are too important for us to start begging to be member of BRICS. If they didn't think we were worthy enough at the very beginning to have been part of the formation of BRICS, he's not going to even accept if they invited us to come and join. And I think that was the thinking within the foreign policy establishment as of that time. Let's ask ourselves, Ambassador Akpata had raised very significant issues as regards how our interests and the interests of BRICS, assuming you can even talk about the interests of BRICS, because he had shown, and I think quite correctly, my point of view, that the interests of various members of BRICS are actually not the same, but that at this very beginning, when you want to form a new currency, it's so easy to be against something than for you to have success in forming the alternative. And now that you are bringing in 6 new others, progress within BRICS as regards what they want to achieve is going to become more difficult. Do we have alternative paths? Because we cannot turn our back on the international community. I agree with Ambassador Akpata that our economy is in a deep mess. But the joy that I have talking about Nigeria is that Nigeria is not a banana republic. 3 months after removing the subsidy, we have seen how the revenue accruing to the federal government, to the national force, has gone up. We could extrapolate this to when it's going to be 6 months, when it's going to be 9 months. Number 2, if we can see the evidence is there of the increase in oil output now that some steps are being taken to plug the theft of our oil resources. I'm a bit worried about the control of the armed forces involvement and the conflict between the armed forces, especially the Navy, and the private organization. And I think the president should quickly step in and read the Riot Act, from my point of view, to the Navy. Because what the Navy seems to be doing is to put itself in a positive light by clamping down on the private organization, which seems to be exposing the involvement of the Navy in oil bunkering. If that can be done adequately, the resources by within 6 months, 9 months, will probably cure the issue raised by Ambassador Akpata as to the state of our economy. That's what gives me hope that, frankly, we can address at a very quick rate the issue of our economy and now move into an activist phase of our foreign policy again.
Thank you, sir. I can see Ambassador Joe Keshi. Ambassador Keshi, can you please unmute yourself now?
Thank you very much. I have listened very attentively to all the points and issues that have been raised. And I'm grateful that Ambassador Akpata made some clarification. And I would also say, just to place on record, that at the point of South Africa becoming a free and independent country, the ministry organized a very huge seminar in which papers were developed, and I believe, memos sent to the presidency at that time on Nigeria's relationship with South Africa. So in one way or the other, we were prepared on how to engage South Africa. I'm saying this because I'm not easily given to conspiracies. The VP said we were not invited. So if you were not invited, why did you go? He had, practically in my view, no business being there, because we, at least, some of us try to send a message that nobody should even bother to go, not even an ambassador, because of one simple reason. As it said in the land of my ancestors, when South Africa decided to invite all members of the AU to mix with BRICS members at the sideline, those who are familiar with the word sideline, it shows you, as they will say in our country here, that they just want to use us to shine. And they did that successfully anyway, at the end of the day. But I just think that what we need to focus on in order to advise government is the fact that, and Ambassador Akpata said it very well, if we have to earn respect within the international community, we need to do a lot of things domestically. At the end of the day, foreign policy is an extension of domestic policy. We need to put our house in order. And this is very crucial, because once you do that, it gives you that confidence to be able to pursue an assertive, foreign policy. The fact that all these years, everybody says, we've not done well, our foreign policy has not been strong and all that kind of thing. It's also because the domestic environment has been weak. You can't have a strong foreign policy while your domestic environment is weak. No, it does not operate that way in my view. So I just think that whatever recommendation we need to make, we need to let government know that it is very important, very, very important to strengthen the domestic base. And Professor Akiyemi referred to the fact that we are getting more money. Sir, with all due respect, anytime we get more money, it's an opportunity for us to misuse to spend stupidly as we have done in the past. Look at the amount of money that has been given to the National Assembly, for example, to buy vehicles. 5 billion each is being given to each state without anybody giving them instruction. This is what you are going to do. Monies have been given to states in the past. What happened to them? They just simply disappeared. So these are, if we can put, I'm not a fan, I'm not a strong advocate for joining BRICS. And I believe I go with President Jonathan. I've said it in some of our discussions that, look, if they were not invited, we shouldn't lose sleep. But if we make our domestic environment strong enough, nobody will tell them that they need us. And at that time, we have to make up our minds whether we want to join or not. But for now, we shouldn't lose sleep. But we should advise government on how to deal with these issues and advise the foreign ministry as well. And also advise, and I'm saying this with all amount of sincerity, because in the earlier part of the discussion, there was an attempt to say, did we know or we did not know? When the coup in Niger happened, my first reaction was, the French were there. Did they know? The Americans were there. Did they know? Nigerian intelligence service, did they know? Because this is our neighbors. So if these fellows were meeting all these years, did we know or we did not know, and what did we do? So again, it shows you that there are so many things we need to do internally, including, of course, strengthening both our national security and intelligence, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to be able to react and advise government as quickly as possible when these things begin to happen. Otherwise, quite frankly, I'm glad we are having this conversation. We do not have to lose sleep about whether we are in BRICS or not, but we should convince ourselves that we need to do more at the domestic level. Even if we join BRICS, for goodness sake, what are we going to sell? Again, oil? Because that's the major thing we've been selling. But we need to do more at the local level to ensure that we can actually become a critical player within the Committee of Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Igali, do you want to unmute yourself, sir? Ambassador Igali, you should be able to do so now.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, moderator, I would like to quickly again emphasize the fact, I think we're almost coming to that conclusion, that we should not bother too much on whether we're invited to join BRICS at this time or at the beginning. I think we're beginning to get to the understanding that we are not a banana republic, we're a big nation. The world, neither the global north or the other countries in the global, so-called global south, even China or India, can easily push Nigeria aside, or South Africa, our neighbor, our African brother. So I think that Nigeria should move on after all has been done. We cannot tag along South Africa, particularly in an organization in which it has a preponderance. I don't think there is a, Ambassador, with all due respect to Ambassador, but I don't think we have that perception that South Africa is in a competition with us. The truth is that it's not a perception, it's a reality. From when South Africa, under the great weight of Mandela, came to the scene, they began to nurse this idea of being spokesman for Africa or being the main African country. And I remember at a particular forum in Denmark, when we ambassadors were there and the South African ambassador was asked by the other SADC members to speak for Africa, and the Danish authorities accepted. I objected. I said, no, you can't do that. Either you follow presidents or Nigeria speaks. We're the biggest country on the continent. And finally, I had my way. So they've always had this idea of being a major African country, perhaps because of their technological advantage over us. Now, as the president has said, His Excellency Professor Hakim, I think what is critical is for us to begin to. And I think that's the last point Ambassador Keshi made, which, although I don't agree with him completely, we are not going to wait until everything is okay domestically. No country has a perfect domestic situation. But
Sure.
let us work a little bit more on certain domestic things and cut out a way for ourselves. The world is full of other countries, like-minded countries, that we can work with. And Ambassador Akpata and Ambassador Keshi will remember the times when we had a concert of medium powers. I was fortunate to one of my writings to stumble upon the classified CIA documents. And when the concert of medium powers met in Lagos, there was some strong exchange of communications between headquarters and the US embassy in Lagos, expressing concern about this new body and that they should watch how the body goes and reports faithfully on what is happening with this new concert. The world noticed us and took us seriously. The world cannot ignore us. There are countries we can talk to. Turkey is there, and the Mint countries and others who are not originally in Mint. We can talk to them and have also another geopolitical grouping. We cannot just fold our hands and cry over spilled milk. Let us move ahead and think, advise government. Government, if we are going to be activists, let's be serious about it and be activists and be the voice of the black man. We will continue to be that voice. And I don't think we should cringe at this stage because of certain domestic circumstances. Let's move on with our robust foreign policy in this new government. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Kayode Komolafe, do you want to unmute yourself, sir?
Yeah, thank you again, Mr. Moderator. Now, I want to pose an hypothetical question. If BRICS were to, that is, put together by America, United Kingdom, and Japan, and some other countries, we will be saying what we are saying now, that we should not lose our sleep. It does not matter. We have problems, and engage in this unnecessary self-flagellation, more or less inferiorizing our own mentality. All the countries in BRICS, they have problems. Russia, China has its own problem. The two African countries they've just invited, Egypt and Ethiopia, they also have their problems. The point I was making earlier is that whereas those who are in BRICS are permanently engaged in trying to build an economic bloc. So we should have a political economy approach to this issue. We are more interested, we seem to be more interested in the politics of it because we don't want to offend the West. Ramaphosa said in the speech at the BRICS conference that IMF and World Bank, they become tools of geopolitical contestation by the West. And that is what they are rising against. Secondly, the focus of BRICS now is that they want to attempt the de-dollarization of the global economy, and we are part of it. All our discussion in Nigeria about the political economy now is around dollar. Everything, from the price of vegetable to the price of oil, everything is about dollar. And an alternative is being proposed, and we are saying that we should not, lose our sleep, about it. Now, I'm talking about mismatch and that people have divergent objectives. Now we are going to G20 next week. All the countries there, do they have the same objectives? Are they all of the same economic standards? Do they have the same interest? So, what I'm saying is that, we should not say, the way I see it is that in Nigeria, we don't want to offend our masters in the West, and therefore we should not be seen as fraternizing with those who regard as the West as demonized. And finally, we should be wary of being infected by the pessimism about BRICS. Just as my compatriots are saying that we should not lose our sleep about BRICS, BRICS also will not lose their sleep if Nigeria does not join. The man who even coined the acronym, in an interview with Financial Times a few weeks ago, was putting the whole idea that it is crazy for them to be thinking of an alternative, currency to dollar. So you could see the basis of what we are saying. the idea of the own development bank, which they have in Shanghai, the West is pushing it. So we should not join the chorus, of spreading the pessimism about BRICS. With or without Nigeria, BRICS will move. I mean, according to the logic, of history. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. Professor Akinfenwa. Okay, sir.
Mr. Moderator, please.
Yes, sir.
Can we interrogate the use of those two words? Three words. Our masters in the West. Given the state of our economy, the involvement of the Chinese in our economy, I think it's Ambassador Leo who said the Russians are coming back to try and resuscitate the linchpin of industrialization, the steel industry. When Sanusi was in the central bank, the way he put together now a basket of currencies that included the Chinese currency, can we still be talking meaningfully, as KK has just done, about our masters in the West? Can we?
All right, sir. Is that the question you want us to throw out now, sir? Or...
I don't know. I don't mind people raising other issues. I just wanted those, because you see, if we lock ourselves into that mentality of our masters in the West, then we will be anti-BRICS. To me, for all the wrong reasons. I am at par with Ambassador Igali that we are too important to be labeled anti-West or anti-East. And I think that the involvement of other nations in our economy is so complex. It's not like on the eve of the Civil War, when we were so locked into the Western economy. But now, the involvement of other nations in our economy is such a complex one that we shouldn't be talking about our masters in the West are now our, I suppose, enemies in the East. I see BRICS, irrespective of the motivation behind its being formed. It has, unfortunately, maybe because of the war in Ukraine, it has locked itself into a position where it is perceived as being anti-West politically. If it's just economically, we will all sign on to it. The Bretton Woods institutions, World Bank, IMF, they deserve to be unscrambled. Even France has been trying to promote a pan-European bloc in opposition to what he says as the American bloc. And what we, or at least some of us, are starting to see is that there are so many nations which are not in BRICS and which want to be seen as being neutral, the new neutrality or the new non-alignment. And we've mentioned their names: Mexico, Turkey, Malaysia, even some of the European medium power countries who will be looking for, if you like, a platform or a movement or a bloc where they can exercise some non-alignment politically, but economically, they may even find points of view with BRICS, but politically, they don't want to be perceived as being anti-West. And can we take advantage of that? I believe Nigeria should not be sleeping. I don't believe that Nigeria has become so weak. Yeah, people, you know, it is the Ethiopia has just survived one civil war, is almost becoming engaged in another one. Is Ethiopia in a better situation than Nigeria? That we should be careful about the marketing of this country, because people then listen to us and then say, but you said about your own country.
Thank you for that, sir. I saw Professor Akintenriwa's hand raised earlier. I don't know if you still want to comment there, sir.
Yes, I want to do. Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
I would like to agree on one point with Ambassador Igali, disagree on another point, simply because of the point raised by Ambassador Akpata. The issue of rivalry, I think there is an unwritten policy of rivalry between Nigeria and South Africa. And I will just simply give one or two examples. And the great ambassadors on this platform can attest to or disagree with it. First, the way we have P5 at the level of United Nations Security Council, the AU has its own big five, B5. South Africa is one of the five. Nigeria is one. We have Libya, Algeria, and one other. Agreement was reached at the level of this B5 that when it comes to election of candidates, etc., along, that none of the big five will not present any candidate. It is on this particular basis that Nigeria opted to support the Gabonese, at the point in time for election. But South Africa disregarded that particular principle. That was the time the South African foreign minister lobbied and was elected to become the chairperson of the AU Commission. Now, when you look at this type of principle, how will you explain the fact that Nigeria accepted to respect and South Africa will not? Now, these big five, they constitute severally and collectively a major challenge to Nigeria's foreign policy. So if one is saying there is no rivalry, no, I belong to the school of thought that argues that there is rivalry. Now, Ambassador Igali made the beautiful point again that there is no need unnecessarily worrying limitation of BRICS. And this is where I take my distance from the submission of KK, the Common Affair. The beautiful point is that when you earn respect, to borrow the word of Ambassador Akpata, people will come to you. And I think that what Nigeria needs in terms of moving forward, did we have, what is it that we can say we had when the same Bolaji Akinyemi came up with the idea of a concert of million powers, which Ambassador Igali rightly drew attention to? What is it? The trust of Professor Akinyemi's approach was to say, regardless of the situational reality of your economy, the domestic situation, you can still apply your intellectual resources, you can still contact, you can still deal with the international community. So I believe that in moving forward, and because membership of the BRICS is unnecessarily becoming unwieldy, I think Nigeria can give herself a personality in such a way that the way people opposing the BRICS went to talk about mint, we too can revive our own idea of a concert of million powers. We can put 10 before, not standing for Nigeria. It can be new concert of million powers. The name can change, but let Nigeria provide leadership in various ramifications. And then let the world know that, look, Nigeria is Nigeria. Nigeria cannot be South Africa. And I am hypothesizing now that Nigeria that we are complaining about, whose domestic economy, domestic politics, insecurity all along, let us borrow from Robert Mugabe, who said that Africa without Nigeria is hollow. He said it many decades ago, and it still remains valid. We can be having our own problems, but the beauty of it all is that South Africa, Sierra Leone, Kenya cannot suddenly in one day have Nigeria's population. Nigeria still remains the world capital of Black people the world over. Biggest population. We may have some countries having territorial size bigger than us, but the main fact is that Nigeria has the biggest arable land in Africa. These are things we should capitalize on and then use diplomacy. I thank God Almighty that, look, according to UN records, they defer to Nigerian diplomatists when it comes to taking decision on critical matters. They seek their opinion. The same thing for military. They are the one asking Nigeria to please kindly consider giving us XY general. Indians are there, others are there, but they defer to Nigeria. This is not hearsay. I had the opportunity when I was SA to two foreign ministers asking for Nigeria's position. So this is what we should capitalize on and now look at what had been done. We can still take advantage. I'm a proponent of, revisiting the idea of a concert of million powers. And I cannot remember the interlocutor who said the world was shaken when the concert of million powers was raised. Probably it was Ambassador Igali, but I couldn't remember. The world, all right, caught fears when Nigeria simply decided to sneeze that particular time. The time is still there. We can do it. Let us look at concert of million powers, the principles, the rationales, the philosophy behind that, and then we can move forward. Thank you, sir, respectfully.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Professor Kemi, I'll crave your indulgence. I know that quite a few people would still want to talk, but there was a clip that we showed at the start of the program that some people may have missed about the academy and the aims and objectives of the academy. And I think maybe we should show that clip again before we go to the next person. I can see Israel Igwe with your hand raised. When we come back from this short clip, it would be you that I will come back to. So let's get that clip played now. Thank you very much. Israel Igwe, do you want to unmute yourself, please?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go on. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, so quite quickly, I agree with most of the opinions expressed here, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that some people have mentioned here economy is important. President Obasanjo brought back a one-time Goldman Sachs MD to Nigeria to help Nigeria in order to become part of BRICS. We shouldn't lose sight of that. So, according to Ambassador Keshi, and which I agree, we need to really work inwards. Once we are, okay, like in 1985, India was being described as a caged tiger. So India was looking to launch out. If we put our house in order, Indians will come, Chinese will come looking for us instead of South Africa. I remember the Nigerian South Africa Joint Commission I attended with late Professor Ositeze. Many people were asking us, non-Nigerians, non-South Africans were asking us, how come that Nigeria allows South African companies to set up a shop in South Africa and have their operation in Nigeria, where they make more money than South Africa? So if we are serious, we put our house in order. Some of these views we have expressed, I think that we on our own can sponsor a group or an organization like people have mentioned here, revive the concept of medium power or Mint, which is also those who generated BRICS are the same people who generated. We can be part of that and begin to think of medium powers that we could work with. There are so many in the world, like Ambassador Gali said. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I can see Dr. Husseini. Can you please unmute yourself? Dr. Husseini.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Excellencies. I think two ambassadors here, Ambassador Igali and Ambassador Keshi, honestly made my day. We have to make ourselves internally relevant. And anybody who says South Africa is not on our way or in our way, then we are not serious. At every opportunity, South Africa is in a position, has always been in a position to downgrade Nigeria, even when the interest of Nigeria does not determine the interest of South Africa. South Africa, as far as I'm concerned, do not, and I repeat, do not sponsor Nigeria to anywhere. Come Security Council meeting for whatever it is, believe me sincerely, South Africa will push Nigeria out and South Africa will be a member. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. No hands raised at the moment. Professor Kemi, do you want to move the conversation on in the time that we've got left? Is there any other aspect that you want to explore, sir?
Yes. And anyone who knows me will know that I buy and have been emphasizing the need for us to turn inward and develop an industrial military complex the way Turkey have done it. But I want to share the following with you. I'm reading from my phone now, but you will see the point that is driving me. The person who sent this said, do not talk down your country while others see its potential and take advantage. One, over 1,000 Chinese have built factories worth billions across Nigeria, producing almost all consumer items. Two, America is starting to build its largest consulate globally in Lagos. Three, Chinese investors are building a plant for mining lithium in Kaduna. India investors are set to complete Nigeria's first steel plant and one of the few on the continent. Local and foreign investors have just built a new seaport and the most significant the nation has ever had. Portuguese investors are funding the high-speed rail link from Nigeria to Niger Republic. 5 or 6 classes is giving trouble. A Gambian investor has built the biggest estate in Port Harcourt. Next, an Indian investor has built the biggest cassava plant in the country. Next, Elon Musk's Starlink has launched one of its first continental projects in Nigeria. South Koreans have grown their business with Nigeria to over $1 billion. Germany funded the first national comprehensive electricity usage mapping app in Nigeria. German Siemens are revamping Nigeria's electricity sector. Spanish companies just recently signed agreements to develop the gas sector. And this, whoever sent this to me then added, I haven't included here Nigerian investors. I have
Go ahead, sir.
I haven't added here Nigeria investors who are investing in their own country. The potential and the actuality of Nigeria are mind-boggling. Now, a lot of this is I'm not aware of it because I'm not a businessman. But I think the point that is being made is, which I will repeat, Nigeria is not a banana republic. Two things are lacking: discipline and leadership. We run down, even when we have the leadership. You know, some of our governors have just gone to Kigali, and I've made my views known about that trip. Will Nigeria accept, even if a leader, even if that leader is as honest as the president of Rwanda, will we accept him? After 3 years, we probably will say we've had enough. It's time for him to go. We are still practicing tribal rotation. Is that conducive to development? Having said that, let me also say, however, I'm aware of India. India is one of the most tribal-oriented countries in the world. And in fact, hardly a month goes by that you don't read about, intra-tribal conflict in one sector of India or the other. But the fact is that the leadership had, in a way, prioritized and sanitized a sector for industrial and technological development in India. And we are now hearing about it today, 2 weeks after a rocket landed on that side of the moon that no one had ever gone to. Today, another rocket left India to go to the sun, this time by India. In Nigeria, if anybody who tried that, we will be telling him where the price of food is this and price of water is this. Here is the man now busy, doing technological something. Who is it going to benefit? I'm sorry, I have said leadership and discipline. The third is ourselves. We, the people on this platform, we will be the first to be naysayers. We will find reasons why we must vote down that program. And I'm not talking theoretically. This is something I have experienced in my time as a minister. It was my colleagues in the university, more than anything else, who continued to shoot down any program that I came up with. And I know what the military leader said to me. What's wrong? What's wrong in the relationship between you and your colleagues that they find nothing good in what you are trying to do as a minister, even when we can see it? Jealousy, whatever the reasons may be. So these 3 things are probably what we should go after: leadership, discipline, and a reformation of ourselves to believe in Nigeria and not to find reasons why we should continue to demarket Nigeria. After whatever the decision of the Supreme Court may be, because that's the final court, after that, maybe because I keep hearing Ambassador Igali said, we must talk to the government in situ and propose programs and this and that. And the reason I'm saying maybe we will wait until after the Supreme Court decision is, believe me, if I were to reveal ideas of Ambassador Lewu, in fact, you will think that he and I have been spying on each other, because I suggested, as soon as the government was in place, this whole idea of what do you call it, in diplomacy, going round and round and round. And I gave them the name. Don't bother with going to South Africa. Go to China, go to Brazil, go to India. That's if you are interested in BRICS. Go. Of course, again, I can understand if their focus is on the domestic scene. If it is, to use Bola Ige's term, if it's a FIDE government that you are not sure of what the tribunal will say, what the Supreme Court will say, maybe you don't want to, go in for big ideas. I suggested bringing in Musk and setting up a whole Ministry of Aerospace and give Musk 2 years to help us lay, the platform where assembled rockets will be in Nigeria, will be lifting off from Nigeria. I don't know if there's anybody who is listening. Yes, we have a new minister now for aviation and aerospace. I will separate the two. Aerospace is big enough for one minister. So the consensus, as I listen to us, the consensus is that people want us to go onto the global scene and play our role. This is not new. It hurts when people make it sound as if it is something new when we talk about Nigeria as a global player. Go back to when Azikwe first came back from the United States. That's when he started to talk about Nigerian exceptionalism, because he borrowed it from American lexicon. And gradually, even the colonial powers bought into that because they wanted to use us to checkmate Nkrumah. When the military boys came in, it was something that appealed to them, that Nigeria is a black power. It appealed to the military boys. And that has never left us. But we have never just got it right. Whenever you got a leader like Murtala Mohammed, who actually got it right, he got shut down. Is that part of the, if you like, conspiracy against Nigerian evolution? I happen to believe that Yaradua will have got it right. The few times I talked to him, he had embraced, if you like, the left socialist thing about Nigeria being a world power. He had embraced it. The state of his health didn't let him. And unfortunately, Jonathan didn't embrace that. And we know what happened with our last president. Now that we have a new president, as I said, after the Supreme Court might have given its ruling, maybe we will seize an opportunity to now put an agenda on the table that in 8 years' time, we members of the academy believe on behalf of Nigerians that this is where Nigeria should be. So, Mr. Moderator, I don't think we need to belabor the point that we believe Nigeria is bound to, that Nigeria has the capability to be a global power. And that, the ideas of how to get there are all on the table. They are so obvious. And whatever we need to do to get there, that's really what we should be talking about. Not whether our economy is bankrupt. I don't believe Nigeria is bankrupt. I know what J.P. Morgan said. Yeah, that's what they said about India. That's what they said about Turkey. But at one time, XYZ is the sick man of Europe, and then the sick man of Europe all of a sudden becomes, the big man of Europe. People will try to run us down. We must accept that. The fault, when it is ours, must be corrected.
All right. Thank you very much for that, sir. I see you mentioned Murtala Mohammed got it right. And I can see a hand raised, and the name is actually Murtala Mohammed. And that person will be next in line. Ambassador Lewu, I can see that your hand is raised. I will call you after I call Murtala Mohammed, because that's a voice that we haven't had yet today. But before I do that, I can see some of the comments. There is a weekly program that Professor Bolaji Akinyemi has, where he talks about comments on different international issues. I'll play this clip. I'll be back, and as soon as we get back, Murtala Mohammed will cut over to you for your points. All right, Murtala Mohammed, can you please unmute yourself and make your point? After that, Ambassador Lewu, I'll come back to you, sir. Murtala Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Murtala Mohammed, same as Murtala Mohammed, the former head of state. Yes, Murtala Mohammed got it right. How did he do it? Murtala Mohammed is a Nigerian patriot, a Pan-Africanist. Murtala listened to intellectuals. Actually, Murtala from intellectuals like Prof. Akinyemi. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hello?
We lost briefly. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
So Murtala used ideas from intellectuals, and that is why he succeeded. And Murtala promoted the foreign interests of Nigeria, likewise promoting domestic, putting the ground in order. And that is exactly what he does. And I see no problem when South Africa is competing with Nigeria, when South Africa is undermining or sabotaging Nigeria. That is exactly what is done throughout the world. Nigeria should do the right thing by promoting its own interest. We can go to any level to ensure that our interest is promoted. Let's put our house in order. That is one. Secondly, and most importantly, we must note that the world is changing. There are some trends that are happening. The emerging economies are coming up, ganging up, coming up with ideas to promote their own interests. So Nigeria doesn't have to, as so many other speakers have said, we don't have to bother about BRICS. We don't have to bother about MIN too. Let's study MINs. Let's come up with acronyms or gather some economies. Let's promote our own development. That is exactly what is needed. But competition must go on. We must have the muscle to compete with the developed world or other developing economies. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Ambassador Lewu.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor again. I just want to thank the President, His Excellency Bolaji Akiyemi, for the way he rounded it up earlier on, his comments on the consensus. I was saying the other time that if we were interested, we should have done what do you call it, shuttle diplomacy, to go around all those countries that we feel are more friendly to us, if we wanted to be really part of BRICS. At the same time, it is left for us, for the stakeholders, to have a consensus of mind as to whether we should go back to all the stakeholders and re-examine our interests, whether BRICS will satisfy our interest or not. What is important is our own national interest. Shall we get that out of BRICS or not? If we can get it out of it, why not? We can belong to BRICS. That doesn't stop us from having a relationship with the West. Certainly the West, I thought we have thrown away the concept of Western powers being our masters. That doesn't exist anymore. It should be removed from our own mental faculty that we should be on our own and not thinking of a master somewhere. We should be assertive in our own right. In the French were the ones that are still struggling to free themselves, to liberate themselves from France. That's why they have this coup, whether it is legal or illegal. I support their movement of freeing themselves from the stronghold of their neck by France. So we should, in our own case, be able to use our non-alignment policy to deal with both the West, the East, or whoever, as long as we can obtain from any organization the national interest of Nigeria is preserved and advanced. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any other hand raised at the minute. So Professor Akemi, I'll come back to you, sir.
Well, looks like all that needs to be said, has been said. And if I can then just do a roundup, and maybe there are members on the platform who can then refine my consensus. I think really the first one is that we don't need to lose any sleep over the invitation to us to join BRICS, that we shouldn't lose any sleep over it. That's the first. And the way forward is turn inwards, rebuild our own system, a military-industrial base, if we want to go the Turkish route, cleverly and clearly and quickly remove the obstacles that have been, not the obstacles, the factors that have been used to run our economy down. Remove them. That's bearing in mind that within the multifaceted political system that we run is a contentious one, and mistakes will be made, but that the government should not be afraid when it makes mistakes, to revisit the issue. Scholars, professionals with ideas, technocrats are out there that government should tap into their ideas. This country, after all, belongs to all of us. It's not an exclusive preserve of any political party. In fact,
I think we lost Professor Akinyemi there. Okay.
Opening to them, tapping into their heads, tapping into their ideas, like Murtala did. And let's give him his due. General Gawan also did. I mean, all the super pump sets that, he depended upon, and the way he brought also, I bought into ideas by the political class to steer the country away from the precipice where it was heading. It will be to the advantage of the country. And we, on our part, should not hesitate. It doesn't have to be on the platform of the academy alone. To use our local proverb here, the sky is wide enough for all birds, to fly without colliding. That the Nigerian Intellectual Forum is wide enough for ideas to be presented and for government to tap into those ideas. The beauty about Nigeria is, I bet each one of us on this platform knows somebody that is in government that we can share ideas with and use that person as a conduit of our ideas getting into place where they can be used for the benefit of the country. And I think there's a consensus that even for those who think it will be a difficult assignment, there's a consensus that Nigeria owes it to the Black race. We owe it to ourselves to be a player on the global scene. There are countries that are not as organized as we are, in spite of our problems, who are making it on the global scene. And we should be prepared to play our part, to play our role. And I think I would say, should I say we're optimistic enough that we will make it? That to me really will be my, if you like, summary of the top of my head. Of course, this program is being recorded, and our assistant secretary, in conjunction with Secretary General, will probably tidy up the conclusions and the debate, and give us a document that we can then work upon.
Thank you, sir. I think I can see one last hand raised. Oyegoke Omigbodun, do you want to make your point, and then maybe we'll bring the program to a close after that? Oyegoke Omigbodun, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I regret that I joined a little late, but after listening to Professor Akinyemi's roundup of the points and issues raised, there's still something that perhaps just came to my mind, and perhaps we may be thinking about it. It's been said several times, almost overflogged for that matter. We are huge in Nigeria. We are actually so many nations in one. People will throw jokes about the probability of the president of Nigeria sitting with that of the Gambia, and the population, and Gabon, and all these small countries. They are just as small as some of our smallest states in Nigeria. And there was a time when we had the three big regions. And I mean, looking back, I'm an architect still now. Ever since Cocoa House was built, 1961 to 1965, outside of Lagos, there is nothing that tall, nothing that huge, nothing that ambitious. So many other things that we can refer to that happened because we had three regions that were in relative healthy competition, one with another, and they were able to move forward. And so going straight to the point is recognizing that politics and development are always intertwined one way or the other. And we've seen that being so huge as we are and not be, almost like an elephant not able to move forward, why don't we still rehammer this issue of restructuring so that the development agenda for Western Nigeria can come up with certain things and the states of Southwest can do certain things, state of Northeast, rather than looking inwards to do it. What we find happening is that each region is also now going to the central space, to the national space, to have a ministry of the Niger Delta, a ministry of the Northeast. I know one of our own senators has represented something about Western Nigeria again and again. And it's like rather than wanting to bake the cake, we all want to have a bite of the cake. But restructuring should make it easy for us at little points, space, geographical space and population, not bigger than that of the Gambia or of Rwanda, to be able to do things that when they are now put together, the agglomeration will be something big. It's not even going to be arithmetic. It should be geometric, and then Nigeria can now truly be big. And so we should be looking at that, and we should not mind particular people who could have said, oh, restructuring my foot. Some people would even argue that Ebola Ahmed Tinubu did relatively well as governor of a small place called Lagos, but I'm not sure he's actually doing well as president of this huge entity called Nigeria today. So restructuring is one thing we should look into. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your submission there, sir. Professor Kemi, am I okay to bring the program to a close now?
Do you have things on chat you want to share with us?
Yes, there are some comments that have been coming in over the course of the program, but we've been addressing them as we go on. One of the ones I see here, someone saying thoughts are that South Africa may have lobbied to be part of BRICS. I've got another one here, someone submitting, it is easy to say Nigeria may lack perceptiveness about her place in the global system and not explicate the immediate and latent reasons for the non-perceptiveness, which would most likely include the rationale for the appointment of MFAs, ambassadors, and other diplomats. We can't have partisan representatives whose loyalty is primarily to their party demagogues than to the citizenry, and expect them to plan and mobilize towards positioning Nigeria as a major power in the global south. That was a comment from Toby Adewumi. Another one here, Ambassador Igali, which he spoke to. I do not think Nigeria should cry over spilled milk. Nigeria should not tag behind South Africa in an organization in which it seems to have preponderance. We are a big country with great aspirational influences. Then we've got another one here, two techniques in balance of power, bandwagon and alliance. The bandwagon, weak member attaching itself to the stronger one, is off the table. So your second option is valid. Alliance, we go our way, look for other like-minded countries and form a different global economic or political grouping. Then that one was from Adewumi Falode. Then we've got another one from Adesua. They are after strong economies, but we don't qualify. I guess that means Nigeria, by the we there. By the time Nigeria can keep our house in order, we can form our own economic alliance. Olawale Lawal, South Africa made BRICS because her foreign policy is not Afrocentric. The problem with Nigeria is that she's neither sufficiently a regional influential and also unable to meet strategic global foreign policy goals. Nigerian foreign policy is too full of curtsy rather than strategy. Another one is just a question here. Eniola Adeoye. BRICS, in my view, is a catalyst to an imperialist position, but not an anti-imperialist movement. It is aimed at weakening the impact of imperialist sanctions. Nigeria may not need it, but the world does.
Okay.
So, yeah, we have questions, comments like that, that have been there throughout.
Thank you.
Yes. So, yes, I think we've dealt with most of the comments there, and also some comments I can see on YouTube. Some people have asked the question, how do we get the recording? This program was broadcast live. I shared the link in the chat window. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do go live in Professor Akinyemi's weekly program every Thursday, and I'm sure that you will get more information about other programs as well from that YouTube channel where we have shared. And then there is a last comment here from Akin Fatunke. For me, the big elephant in the room, let Nigeria Supreme Court make the bold required pronouncement of the elections so we can constructively move for a reorganization, I think is what I can see there. All right, brilliant. Thank you everyone for joining today. I don't know if either Ambassador Joe Keshi or Professor Akintarenwa wants to close, or we're good to close. Are we good? Just trying to get a cue there. Are we good to close? Yep, everybody's saying we are good to close. I can see a comment that's just popped in from.
Let's go on now. All right, let's go on now.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. All right. On that note, we bring the program to a close. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, moderator.
Thank you.
Situation of shadow government, it's a given. But I think if that's not done, if I thought that was done